Anthony Pack. Anthony Pack, who will be taking the reins from here on out. So he has been promoted from his role as regional hub director of the Western U.S., Canada, and even the Asia Pacific regions. And it's funny. I think that this is now this blue gingham is now the official uniform of the global hub director. So I think Flavio was also wearing this too. So Flavio, I had my eyes on you for later. But I just wanted to say, I think it's been about 2 years. It has been a tremendous honor and a privilege to serve in this position and to build the structure and the vision together with some really key individuals. So Kate, even Aaron, I know Aaron's on the call, which is great. Anthony, who was really Anthony Pack, who really was the impetus behind the vision. And I'm so grateful to hand over this part of the CLF that has so much momentum, as Anthony will share with you. But just wanted to say thank you, Kate. Thanks for the opportunity, and I am so looking forward to watching the CLF Global Hub Network grow. So with that, Anthony, it's yours.
Thank you, Will, and thank you for so much for all the efforts that you put in supporting us as the global director up until this point. And it's come a long ways under your watch. So and also the work of everyone else here. So it's I'm excited to see how I can support moving forward. I am just going to advance through a few slides that we were supposed to get through. So this is a quick agenda, kind of administrative stuff, but we'll go along with the flow in a bit. And so this announcement was just made. So on this point, given that I'm taking on the global hub director role, we'll be looking for somebody to replace my role as the regional director. So right now we haven't developed a formal process for how we're going to go about doing this, but basically, if you're interested in this role, please reach out to me and CC, Anthony Hickling and Kate and just a few of us, so that we can, I think we'll probably have some sort of application process and think through how to do this in a solid way. But yeah, please just indicate your interest to me for now, and that would be great, and we'll move forward from there. Okay, and then I wanted to kind of share a little bit about what I see as the future for the CLF local hubs. So this has been an incredible journey. I mean, this has grown beyond my wildest imaginations. When we first started up CLF Vancouver, that was back in April 2019, when we had our first event. So now it's, and we were planning a few months before then. So it's about 2.5 years kind of since the initial conception of this idea came about. And, since then it's grown quite significantly. Here's a list of the current active hubs. So I've broken it down by the 3 regions. So you can see in terms of the active hubs for the Western North America and Asia Pacific region. Again, we're looking for a regional director here, but you can see the active hubs here and also some of the hubs that are in progress. So they're about to have their first event or in the planning stages of that. You can see in the Central North America and Central and South America region, lots of active hubs here and some of the in progress hubs here. And also in Eastern North America, in Europe and Africa, you can see the active and in progress. So in total, I think we're actually at, I was just doing the tally yesterday because it's hard to keep track. There's so many new hubs starting up all the time, but we have 31 hubs right now. And I think it was 18 active hubs and 13 in progress hubs right now. So that's where we stand currently. And it's incredible. Like, I think we're touching something like 10 countries right now, or regions. And I want to kind of rewind a bit and share a bit about like my story and how this kind of came to be. And I also think that there's some parallels here for what CLF can take on with moving forward. So when I was doing my master's in Norway, this was back in 2010 to 2012, I also helped start up the TEDx Trondheim group there. So that this is, if you're familiar with TED Talks, we basically were kind of the local independently organized group in Trondheim where we would try to kind of bring this concept of ideas worth spreading into our city and bring together, many different people from different backgrounds to, share ideas and to host these types of events and have conversations around important topics. And so, over that span, it's been amazing to see, how much growth there has been with TEDx. But what's interesting is TED also did a really great job of supporting local organizers. So there's, the TED, the main, the mothership TED that hosts like the big TED conference each year. But then there was also hundreds of TEDx organizations around the world that were independently organizing these events. And the interesting thing about that was that I felt like they struck a really interesting balance around giving us just enough guidance to ensure that there's sort of a coherent brand identity and there's a certain level of quality with the events, but at the same time, still giving us a lot of freedom and creativity to create, the events how we perceive or want to create it. And so there was a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation that took place, and a lot of sharing and learning from each other. One of the interesting things was in 2012, I think they created this TED Summit where they brought TEDx organizers from 90 different countries into Qatar in Doha. And at that point, we were just doing a big unconference. We were sharing ideas amongst all the organizers, trying to think about how can we make more of an impact with our organization. And this picture on the left, this was a brainstorming session where we were talking about, okay, TED, we're really great at spreading ideas, but what does it look like to turn ideas into action? How can we make our group more action oriented? And I think there's a parallel there with the CLF hubs, right? Right now, we're doing a lot of education and awareness building with a lot of the events. We have Embodied Carbon 101 presentations and then presentations on concrete or steel or wood, and getting into these subtopics within Embodied Carbon, which is great. But I also hear, from some of the local hubs, there's an interest in thinking about how do we actually become more action oriented? How do we create working groups? How do we what other models can we take on beyond the typical sort of webinar Q&A type of presentation Q&A type of format? And so that's something that I think some of the local hubs have already been innovating on this and thinking about this. There's policy working groups and whatnot, and we'll hear some examples later as well. But I just think that there's some interesting parallels here. And when I zoom out and I think about, you look at where all the new construction that is taking place, or where the projected new construction is taking place across all these different regions. Right now we have 31 hubs, and we're touching on some of these really big regions as well, right? We recently had India start up, Hong Kong started up, or is in the progress of starting up. But I think that's something that we should also think through is as we grow, how do we look not just in North America and Europe, but how do we expand into some of these other regions where maybe the conversation is newer around embodied carbon? And how do we, as a group, support efforts to radically reduce embodied carbon globally? And so these are just some of the open questions that I just kind of brainstormed and it's on my mind. But I would love to actually engage all of you in some of these questions too. How might we support local hubs to launch, gain traction, and impact standard practice within local industry as quickly as possible? From the initial conception of you having the idea of starting up the local hub to actually, gaining traction and getting and impacting the local industry, whether it's the local architects, the structural engineers. How do we get you up and running or support you in that? How do we expand hubs in critically important regions to build awareness and action on embodied carbon? So that's, looking back to that map earlier, how do we touch on some of these regions where there's a lot of new construction? How do we support local hubs in reaching new audiences and stakeholder groups within their local industry? So, there's the people that we're already preaching to the choir to some extent. There's people that show up on our meetings and they're just motivated. But then how do we actually bring this conversation to the people that aren't aware of this topic and aren't pulling for this per se, but do actually need to be aware of it? How do we leverage the expertise of our global network to support regions that are new to embodied carbon? So, there's a lot of local hubs that are starting up in an area, maybe even the local organizer isn't particularly familiar with embodied carbon or doesn't have a lot of expertise, but they're highly motivated. They know it's an important topic. How do we tap into our global network of experts or expertise to help, support them in getting their local region up and running as quickly as possible? How do we enable local hubs to support member-led initiatives among local networks? So not just what you guys as local hubs are doing, but the people that come to your events, the attendees, how do you support them in their efforts to, maybe they have some internal company initiative, or maybe they want to create something as well. How do we enable that? How do we provide a strong set of resources and processes that serve as a useful starting point, while also enabling bottom-up creativity from the local hubs? So this kind of touches on what I was mentioning with the TEDx stuff before, is like just giving just enough guidance and enough templates, but also not restricting your ability to try interesting and enabling resources developed by local hubs to be shared and adapted by other hubs. So how do you guys share resources amongst yourselves? How do we facilitate stronger online discussions and knowledge sharing, both at the global level, which we already have, but also at the local level? How do we facilitate that right now, like in our online communities? And then how do we empower members to become internal champions within their firms and drive initiatives to tackle embodied carbon? You know, if people want to give internal presentations to their firm, how do we kind of train people up? People have kind of suggested the idea of like how Al Gore was training people to give, you know, the climate change presentation back in the day. How do we kind of rapidly train people in that way as well? And also, how do we go beyond awareness and education focused events towards actually driving regional actions? So these are a list of kind of open questions that are on my mind, and I know that are on the mind of many of you. And so this is something that I would love to like brainstorm and dig deeper into. And, you know, I think as a group, we have a huge potential for impact. You may have heard some people say, you know, the most effective thing that you can do about climate change is to talk about it. Well, we're actually in a really unique position because we can influence a huge slice of the global emission pie through the embodied carbon emissions. You know, not just on the projects that we work on, but by virtue of organizing these local hubs, bringing the local stakeholders together. When you talk about climate change and when you talk about embodied carbon, you can have a huge ripple effect. And so with this, this is TBD, but I do want to help organize and kind of an organizer summit to bring together all of you and also the volunteers that are part of your group. So not just the leaders, to actually come together, get into a deeper dive discussion around what's the future of our hubs, what resources do we need, how do we support each other, what are the best practices and learning from each other. So that'll probably be more of like a 2-hour type of event to dive deeper into that. And from that, also collect some feedback to eventually create an organizer toolkit that doesn't just help you get up and running for new hubs, but also supports the existing hubs and how they can scale their impact. So with that, that's it on my piece. Oh, I just realized I didn't have the some of the slides, sorry, the section header slides, but I think Andrew was going to give a presentation and then Anthony was given a presentation. So thank you all. And I look forward to supporting you all. Andrew, do you want to share a little bit about the sign-in process? And then we'll have Anthony Hickling share afterwards. Or Andrew, do you have something to share for that?
It would help if I were not muted, I suppose.
No problem.
I'm a little bit, you know, this is my third meeting this morning, one after another on Zoom. So I'm feeling a little Zoom fatigue here, or craziness. So the point that I wanted to make was just that we have altered the process for people to join the CLF community and then be part of regional hubs in a fairly dramatic way, just by redesigning our internal processes and the way that you sign up on the web. And so the way to do it now is just you go to, if you're not connected already with the Carbon Leadership Forum, if you're not already part of a regional hub, you just go to community.carbonleadershipforum.org and click on sign up. And you get your information into the form, and then within a couple of hours, hopefully you receive then an acknowledgement and an approval for your username and password. And that's the way that you'll be getting information about regional hub meetings, and also the regular monthly newsletter from the CLF, invitations to events and partnership and initiatives and so on. So this is the idea here is we want to make it as easy as possible for anybody in the world to quickly become part of the CLF and get connected with the community, be part of the conversation, get updates and resources and so on. And so removing obstacles is the way to do that.
Perfect, thank you. Anthony Hakelin, you want to go next? And
Sure.
5 minutes presentation. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't even need 5 minutes. This is really just kind of a, I have a document really that I'm just going to scroll through for a couple minutes and then I can share it with you all afterwards. But if I share my screen, we can get started. This is really just kind of an update and heads up for more conversations I think that we should have to come. So the building industry, it's inequitable and it's extractive and it's historically been bad for really, for a lot of different communities. It still is bad for a lot of different communities. The Carbon Leadership Forum has been really spending a lot of time in the last year, I'd say, trying to figure out what our role is in making the building industry, as well as building an organization that is just, equitable, inclusive, and diverse. And we want to make sure that there's,
Can I pause you for a second? I think you're,
Can you not
I'm
see?
not sure if it's just me, but I can't see your, your document.
Oh, okay. Let's see
Disappeared
what's
into
going
a thin white line. It's quite
Yeah,
eerie.
that's weird how it turned into a
Ooh.
thin white line, but nobody can see
Is
it.
that better?
Okay, perfect. That's
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Much better. Thank you.
Okay, it didn't let me move it to my other screen. Okay, so I'm gonna be
Okay.
looking the other way as I'm talking to everybody.
It's all good.
Okay, so as I was saying, I think that as an organization, as we continue growing right now, within hubs is also, and also within the Carbon Leadership Forum official kind of staff members, there's a really big opportunity for us to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is really good for the world beyond just the question of how do we reduce embodied carbon. And we want to make sure that there's an opportunity for hubs to help us kind of co-create what that looks like and make sure that the conversations are not just happening within the small staff that's, you know, employed by the University of Washington, but also more broadly when we're talking about ways to, you know, engage with all of the people that are a part of the broader network. So we've put together a document that is really just kind of a high level look at how we understand our role in building a more just, equitable world. And I'm going to share this with everybody afterwards, but I just want to say that this is really kind of the beginning of a conversation to make sure that everybody can be included in this process with us and be considering ways that these principles can be applied at the local hub levels. So I'm going to scroll through. There's a couple pieces that I highlighted that I just want to mention, and then I'll share it all with you afterwards. I'd love your feedback if this is something that you all are interested in engaging with. So the overall philosophy of CLF, I'm just going to read this first bullet point. Broadly speaking, our mission at CLF is to decarbonize buildings and infrastructure with a keen focus on embodied carbon. We know that climate change has adverse impacts on lower income communities and communities of color. So our ultimate mission is meant to reverse those impacts. Yes, yet we must carry out this work thoughtfully and inclusively so that change does not continue to come at the cost of well-being of frontline and BIPOC communities. So to make that possible, we really need to incorporate the principles of, we call it JEDI, so justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, throughout all of our decision making. So I've highlighted here that we really want to make sure that hub leaders are a part of this conversation to really ensure that the CLF community is a welcoming and inclusive place for people of all backgrounds. So we've really broken up how we're looking at justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in two categories. So one is just in our organizational structure. So this is about how we recruit people who are in speaking positions and leaders and things like that. And then the other piece is more related to our mission. So how is it that embodied carbon as a topic relates to these principles of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion? And how do we make sure that we're prioritizing not just building out an organization that is structurally inclusive, but also focusing on a mission that is not just hyper-focused on embodied carbon. So these are some pieces that reflect kind of org structure and how we've been thinking about that. I think that how CLF relates to our programming is maybe a little bit more relevant for people who are engaging at the hub level. So again, just some things that I've highlighted here at events. For example, how can we be seeking out speakers and other contributors who are not the usual industry suspects? So it's really easy to go to a list of the top 10 or 20 people who are regularly speaking at conferences, have the really impressive advanced degrees or whatever it might be. Are there ways that we can be looking at events and speaking opportunities as ways to enhance and uplift leadership from people who might not otherwise traditionally just get that opportunity right away? How can we be looking at more diverse places to be recruiting people for those events, ways to pull more people into the community that even know about those events, etc. Another example is in the network. So how can we be empowering you all to really incorporate these principles into the regular meetings that you're having and the ways that you're looking at the structure of, Anthony was just talking about what hubs could become. How do we make sure that these principles are incorporated in that future kind of strategizing? Communications, same thing. So how is it that we communicate our work in a way that is not just hyper-focused on carbon, but is really a bit less myopic and actually looks at the big picture of the ways that communities are impacted by these issues? And then moving forward, so we want to make sure, like I said, that there's an opportunity for all of us to work on this together. I'm just gonna mute that real quick. Or no, it's been muted, okay. These are just ways that we can all work on this together. So if you haven't brought this up at your local hub level, I really encourage you all to. And if you have, I'd love to hear the kinds of things that you already are brainstorming and in regards to kind of how you can incorporate these principles throughout your hub level action. Another piece that we're really trying to do internally, but I'd love to have more of an opportunity to do this with hub leaders, is just have a more intentional space of co-learning. So as people learn about events or resources or whatever it might be that can help us be a better organization, how do we make sure that everyone else is aware of that as well? And then accountability. So right now at the Carbon Leadership Forum, we're kind of internally having regular meetings where we go through this plan. We talk about what we've done over the last quarter, what our plans are for the upcoming quarter. So that way we can try to hold ourselves accountable internally, but I think in the broader network, we also want to make sure that this is a conversation that is not just a one-time thing. We don't just talk about it today or just have a training and then let it be, but really make sure that there's a way that we can continue prioritizing it in a way that structurally makes a difference within the hub network and within CLF as a whole. So like I said, I'll share this document with everybody, but I just wanted everyone to know that it's something that we've been thinking about and want to create a broader conversation and opportunity for everyone else to engage on. And I'm gonna leave it at that. It's probably not the best time to open it up for questions, but feel free to email me back if you have questions, comments, etc. after I send this out. And I'm going to pass it off to Megan, who's gonna give the policy update.
Oh, I'm not allowed to share my screen. Andrew, can you let me share mine? Or if that's gonna take a minute, I'll just talk.
Just change it. You should be able to do it.
Okay, got it. I just wanted to give a super brief update on policy. So as I've had the chance to talk with a lot of you this year, which is really exciting, and I'm looking forward to meeting and talking with more of you. We've seen just really an explosion in embodied carbon policy across the US and globally. And the thing that I really just want to talk about today is that regional hubs have an opportunity to inform local policy, and a number of you already do. And I want to take this opportunity to let you know that I'm going to share a document with you after this that sort of gives some helpful guidelines on what it means to engage in policy as a local hub. So we put together some do's and don'ts, which is really just to give you ideas in terms of the do's. You can see there's a lot that can be done. And then in terms of the don'ts, because CLF is not a lobbying organization, we don't advocate for specific policies. We develop broad policy positions on embodied carbon and policy. And we know that that can be a gray area where it's a little tricky to navigate as a hub or as someone who hasn't worked in policy before. And so I would encourage you to reach out and read the one pager that I'm going to share after this meeting. And then I also just want to ask each of you, if you don't already have a policy working group, to either think about creating a policy working group or identify a policy lead in your regional hub. It doesn't have to be someone in a that's already in a leadership position. This is a great opportunity for someone who isn't in a leadership position within a regional hub to have something that they're specifically engaging on as part of the hub. And then very soon we're going to be starting to, once we have leads from each regional hub, start to have quarterly check-ins to hear how each hubs are engaging in policy work. That person will be the lead on receiving policy updates to share with your region. So sometimes, there's stuff at the state level that you haven't heard about. when you're focusing on a city or vice versa, as well as national and international updates, and coordinate policy related events when they come up. And so I'll leave it shortly at that. And then I will say this is just to give you a taste of how much is happening in the US. And one of the things that I'm excited to do, actually, particularly related to the hubs, is that we, as Anthony said, we're in 10 plus, or around 10 countries. And so this is a narrow slice of what we're seeing globally. But the most recent procurement bill was just passed in the US 2 days ago in Colorado, and there's still many active that could be passed this year. And so with that, I'll just leave that as a taste to get, if you have not already looked at our policy toolkit, to take a look at the policy toolkit and identify someone to reach out to me after this meeting. And I'll share that one pager with y'all. So I think with that, I'll just pass it back to Anthony.
Thank you so much. That was great. Okay, so now we're going to jump into regional hub spotlights. So we have 3 hubs to spotlight. So starting off for the Western and Asia Pacific region, we'll have CLF Bengaluru. So can you unmute yourself and share your presentation? Or if you have slides, and if you don't have slides, that's okay. Just you can maybe give a 5-minute update. Perfect, thank you. Let's see, you may be muted though. Let me just see if I can find.
Kanwal, can you unmute yourself?
It should be on the left, bottom left corner.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry for this glitch. Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
All right. So I'll just take a few minutes to just show you what the launch event was on 29th of May. We had a grand event and a grand presence of the leaders from the industry. 4 keynote speakers, 8 panelists, registration targeted at 450, but we didn't reach that, but substantial numbers, around 200 we reached. The evening agenda was divided into opening remarks from the master of ceremony, invocation, the lighting the lamp, the regional theme song, which was around sustainability. The welcome address was given by myself, and then Anthony Pack was there to introduce us to the CLF. When we come to sustainability, we define it very crisply as innovate and evolve. So this presentation by one person, very talented musician, is all about innovation and evolve. It is a combination of a traditional Indian instrument called sitar and the Western guitar. And this was a mix of for Eastern and Western music presented together, that we need to think local, but act global. Or rather think global and act local, in fact. Yeah, sorry for that goof up, yes. So what we do today locally is going to affect globally. And that's the kind of a thought process we need to have. And all of us, we are in this together. And traditionally, we always light a lamp, which is nothing but symbolism of light. Asato ma sad gamayas, tamaso ma jyotir gamaya. What it means is, oh Lord, please take us from darkness to the light, which is a symbolism of knowledge. Now, the four very important people who were there to light that lamp was Mr. Ratan Bala, who is the president of International Society of Automation. And we are working in very close proximity with them. We're going to sign an MOU with them and working towards digital twins and microgrids, how they can play a very big role in decarbonizing the building environment. So we have a plans of making up some kind of a knowledge series along with them. Mr. Syed Berry, who's Indian Green Building Council chairman, and he basically, I'm also part of the core committee member with them, and we do a lot of programs on the green buildings per se. Mr. Rajiv Satyakam from National Thermal Power Corporation. We know that how the thermal powers are the reason for such a large footprint, and they are now innovating a very big way how we can circulate the waste from the thermal plants, the fly ash in a very different way, smart roads, batteries, new formats of batteries and all those things. So they have a specific department. So he was representing the sustainability department of the Thermal Power Corporation. Suhasini Iyer from Auroville. Some of you might be knowing this is a very sought after place in Pondicherry. This is a place where they invented the machine to make compressed earth blocks, which is now used world over, especially in France and in India, in a lot of places to make eco-friendly buildings. It's gaining a lot of traction. I'm part of a lot of groups in Clubhouse, and we see people talking about it as a first thing when they talk about the eco-friendly buildings, and especially the affordable buildings. And the next session was divided into launch of the hub, logo unveiling, website launch, newsletter release, and talking about youth and sustainability. Mr. Vasudevan Suresh, he's the chairman of Indian Green Building Council, and he is the godfather in India who makes a lot of policies at the state and the national level. He's been the MD of HUDCO. HUDCO is an organization, again, which does all the building benchmarking policies and bylaws making and all. They are very much involved into it. So he was generous enough to inaugurate our session. Professor Chetan Solanki from IIT Mumbai, one of the premier institute of India. He's also called the Solar Man of India, and he's on a mission. For the next 10 years, he has left his house and he's on a mission to make awareness to all the people that we should get into solar renewable energy solutions for all our buildings. We are again talking to him, how can we bring his mission to Bangalore and tell that how many houses can forfeit their electrical connection. That means you go completely off grid. It's a humongous task, but let's see how much we can do along with him. Mr. Kishore Jain, he launched the website, and he's the president of CREDAI. CREDAI is a national body of all the real estate developers. And he represents the he's the president of the Bangalore chapter, which is a body comprising of almost 1,200 developer groups. And he was so motivated by the whole inauguration that he declared that CREDAI is going to take a pledge to go carbon neutral by 2050. How they do it, we don't know. We will be working together with them. One project that we have taken up in close association with them is management of construction and demolition waste, which is a very, very big problem. We don't even have what will come, but we have a legacy C&D waste lying into our city, which is a huge problem for the lakes. Can we bring a circular economy is a project that we are planning to work in close association with them. Andrew Himes, he was there on a short notice to be kind enough to release our newsletter. Thanks again for that. Mr. Swapnanil Talukdar, he's a presidential awardee and he's a space scientist, but now he's working on sustainability, and we cannot afford to talk about youth if we are talking about sustainability. So as a CLF chapter, we will be working with an International Society of Association, working with college students that in their curriculum, how can we bring the knowledge of decarbonizing the buildings from automation way, apart from the building materials also, which we'll take up later in another format. So he was a motivational speaker for our launch. Then we had evening agenda split in by 4 keynote speakers, where Anthony spoke about everything about LCAs and EPDs and about how to decarbonize, and giving him a bird's eye view to the whole movement, that what it stands for. Mr. Chunga Cha is a person who's a consultant, who's a founder of called Reimagining Cities, and he's doing some very large projects in Canada and South Africa, a consultant telling how to go net zero into a large campuses. So he gave us an idea whether net zero future, is it a myth or it's a reality? What is a possible roadmap for it? Mr. Rajesh Kumar, he's Senior Director for Sphera, a very famous company. I think they have been taken over now a big time. Today, the recent news was that they have been sold out for their work they are doing for ESGs. And he spoke about, again, LCAs and EPDs into the green materials. Then we had Mr. Alessandro, who's founder and president of a big company called BE Inc. And he spoke about this, bringing circularity into the material, circular economy into the build structures. This was the highlight of the evening. We had a panel discussion comprising of six major heads, all from the building industry and architectural interior designer. So I won't take too much time in explaining. Mr. V. Suresh, the chairman, Habib Khan, he's a president of Council of Architecture. That means he's the one who signs the architect's certificate to certify that you are now an architect. Mr. Sanjay Seth, India has its own green building certification program called GRIHA, which is very stringent as compared to the IGBC. Mr. Sanjay Seth represented that. Ms. Millie Majumdar, she's the MD of GBCI, which is a representation of US Green Building Council. Equivalent to AIA, we have Indian Institute of Architects. Mr. Architect Mohan is a chairman who was present on that. Mr. Dinesh Verma, he represented the Interiors Designers Association. He's a chairman of the Bangalore chapter. And one second, I can't see this site. Yeah, and the moderator was architect Dr. Sujit Kumar. He is principal architect of a firm called Climate, which is art of designing with climate. And he studied and done his PhD on earth sheltered buildings from IIT Delhi. So that's all from my side. We have a lot to do, a lot to learn from you guys. And as mentioned by Mega, and the policy working group is something we are very much interested in. Let us know how can we go forward from here. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. I think we have a lot to learn from you. By the way, the first time they even reached out and connected with us was 2 months before this event. So from the first conversation around starting up the hub to that whole event, which was like 3 hours, more than 3 hours. I woke up at 4 a.m. for this, but it was like incredible, the caliber of people that you brought together and the level of conversation that you did in the first event. So thank you so much for sharing about that, and just incredible work. No pressure. Next one. The next hub, regional hub spotlight is CLF Rocky Mountain. And yeah, Victoria, can you share?
Hello, everyone. I am sorry I don't have nothing like Kanwal presented. I am going to, I know it is, and funny enough, on the sponsor call too, I did have your colleague Kanwal presenting too, and I was behind him, and I felt really bad because I don't have slides or anything. Anyway, we started the CLF Rocky Mountain in February 2020, and we were lucky enough to have our first and only in-person event before COVID hit. So we did an in-person event. Now we have about 30 people, and it was great. And the feel that we got and the conversation that we had, it was like a lot of people were ready to take action. So it's funny, Anthony, I really share a lot of the questions that you have, because, and with Anthony Hicklin presenting in the justice and how like diversity and how to bring other people that they are not the speakers that always come to every meeting, or the most knowledgeable people. So we have done bi-monthly events. It was kind of sad, like after the first in-person event, like there were way less people in the online versions, and we were trying to figure out how to gain momentum and more people to attend. So we have been having, and I'm really excited to see the Colorado Bike Clean passing. So we wanted to take action. So the policy, we kind of created different groups. The policy group with the CLF Rocky Mountain, we signed a letter to support the bill. We also made recommendations for the bill to make adjustments. I have not read it yet, so I don't know if they incorporated any of our suggestions. So those are things that we have been taking action. But the most exciting event that we have had, and the one that had the most attendance on the online versions, have been was the concrete panel. So we had a concrete supplier, a builder or a contractor, and a structural engineer. And all of them brought their perspective on how to tackle this issue and how much is in the conversation and how there's a gap between the conversations that should happen between the contractor and the builder and the structural engineers to make things happen because of problems with the supply chain and not having enough knowledge of embodied carbon. So it has been a lot of like action in that way. And I am one of the co-chairs. There's other two, Matt Jean-Claude and Jim Melentine, and we are the three of us very interested on keeping the movement of action and also engaging people, but at the same time, like I think, I don't know if it was who was saying, Anthony Hicklin or Pac, that to teach people how to educate other people, like giving them the tools to keep educating, not just to come to the CLF. What we have found is that there are a lot of people doing the same thing, but we are all segregated in different groups, and it's kind of like how to bring everyone together. And we kind of felt like that happened with this panel that we did. And it was very interesting because the supplier was like, I don't know if you all know or not, the CGF concrete calculator. So there is a tool that is free for anyone. It's an Excel document. And concrete suppliers have not, at least the ones that we talked to, I've never seen it. And it's like, well, this is like, we spent like half an hour with the concrete supplier and putting mixes, and he was like adding their mixes, and it was super cool to see, oh, this one is within the Rocky Mountain area. This is better than the average or worse. And so now the next step has brought us to we're gonna have a meeting with concrete suppliers and show them the tool, and they are going to be able to use it to see if they can make their mixes better. It seems like very focused into concrete. This just have led us into this conversation. We are trying to have other conversations with policy, with the city of Denver too. So it's more like how all the conversations have taken the action towards this direction, but we're open to any other suggestions. I think our next meeting is going to be about interior materials and embodied carbon reductions and how to use the EC3 tool. So perfect. I don't know, a lot going on.
Thank you for giving that update on a very short notice. And also, I think it's, in these spotlights, it's not just about showcasing successes, but also understanding what are the challenges, because there's probably a lot of commonalities with the challenges that you're facing with what many other hubs are facing too. So I think this is not just about showcasing, but yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. And I'll pass it off to Caitlin. And if we can, sorry, we're running a bit behind on the timeline. So if we can kind of keep it relatively shorter so that we have a bit more time for Q&A at the end.
I'll keep it brief, I hope. Let me share slides really, really quick, super basic. And sorry to be tooting my own city's horn, but we've had a pretty active spring and summer. And the true co-chairs of CLF Boston, Julie Janiski, who's with Borough Happold, and Rochelle Ein, who's an architect with Teal, a firm in Boston, were unable to make it. So I'll speak on their behalf. We've had a lot of great movement on policy this spring and summer in partnership with the City of Boston and their Planning and Development Agency. So the city has kind of been wrapping up its zero net carbon building zoning initiative, which primarily addresses operational carbon. However, in partnership with them, we kind of put on a presentation introducing our community to this zoning initiative, but also introducing them to the concept of embodied carbon and kind of opening it up for Q&A and soliciting ideas for how embodied carbon should be incorporated into the next phase of this zoning, and a technical advisory group has actually formed. I know that Megan and Anthony Fack have kind of both been engaged in this probably a little bit more than I have, but the kind of outcome is to make sure that when the next round of this zoning happens, embodied carbon is accounted for. So this partnership with the city has been great. Following up on our Embodied Carbon 101 series, which was education that happened back in the summer of 2020. Our education working group has put on an impact series, which is more forum and discussion based on some topics we covered last summer and some that we missed. And this is similar to kind of what I think a lot of us have been talking about, moving away from the passive education to talking about, okay, how do we actually implement the stuff we're talking about into practice? And then another neat partnership we had was with the Sustainability Performance Institute, which is kind of a local organization, consulting company, sorry, in Boston. And they put together a deconstruction hackathon. So this was in partnership with our reuse working group. And they kind of got together, I think it was about 50 folks, looking at the AA's guide to deconstruction, but adding kind of some more, in a working doc, adding some more details to like, okay, what does this actually look like and how do we take it to the next step? Sorry to speak quickly through that, but I'm going to leave it at that and just kind of emphasize the success that we've had in partnering with other organizations and entities to kind of make stuff happen.
Perfect. That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, that's amazing. Like I am thinking about, all the activities that CLF Boston's doing when I'm thinking about, how do we actually transition to more action-oriented structures, right? Like the policy technical advisory group, some of these kind of more forum-based discussions. Those are great opportunities. So with that, let's open it up. We have 6 minutes left on this call. But yeah, any thoughts, any general comments, any questions? Feel free to just kind of open it up and unmute yourself. We left 6 minutes for silence.
I have just one quick note. The thing that Megan presented earlier about kind of the do's and don'ts for how we engage with policy is a really helpful resource. So I just highly encourage everybody to make sure that you read that, to make sure that how we are engaging with policy is aligned with what the CLF is supposed to do as a nonprofit organization. So just keep an eye out for that. Make sure that you read it.
And in particular, that pertains to, for example, when there's bills and you're signing support, like there's, you should definitely read this document before getting into that, just because we need to be cautious or cognizant of how like we lobby for policy. And so that's just something to keep in mind. So it's super important. And yeah, Megan will be sharing that soon. Thank you.
This is Lisa from Interface and CLF Philly. I'm really excited about that resource because we have some momentum. I mean, us, but then also our local United States Green Building Council chapter, and then also our local AIA COAT chapter. And we all want to navigate the policy. So that's really timely. And it seems like there's some awesome traction elsewhere that we can build off of. So thank you for making that, because I'm not a policy person, so I'm new to it. So all the tools are welcome.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just like to add a comment also, kind of this, what Lisa was just saying made me think about it. We've got several thousand folks in our database for CLF, and we know where they live for the most part. So if you're in a city somewhere and you're thinking, well, who are my potential partners? Who are the other folks that ought to be part of this regional hub in our city? Contact me and I may be able to work with you to notify everybody who lives in your city who's in our database and is part of our network but doesn't know about or doesn't participate yet in your regional hub. We can leverage the overall CLF community to help build your hub.
I have a question for Caitlin. Can you expand on what you put on the chat, please?
Oh yeah, so
Thank you.
yeah, sorry. So kind of each of the things I highlighted, policy, education, and resources have kind of, and reuse, have their own working groups dedicated to these topics. So our format is to kind of meet as a full hub every other month. And then our working groups meet monthly, and kind of make things happen. And what I kind of added in the group is it's a nice way to, we have our 2 co-chairs, but there are more than 2 leaders in our hub. So it also, when we're thinking about JEDI as well, these working groups offer more opportunities for kind of leadership within the hub and within the larger community. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, but I have a follow-up question to that, because you basically you have the group is a lot of like AIA people. At least in Colorado, we do have in Denver, there's the AIA environmental group, and they already have their task forces, and it's kind of like, it has been kind of like a, not a battle, but it's like, I don't want to spend more time doing something. And so how, since you are AIA, what would you suggest, like to have that engagement or like make that happen?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. And I don't think you're alone. I think I've heard from some other local hubs that are having trouble kind of plugging into organizations that already exist with their own agendas. Those organizations can be super helpful though, because they have kind of the infrastructure and resources to support a hub and amplify its message. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there are ways to, like working groups are in essence subcommittees, and I don't know if there are ways to introduce a hub as a subgroup or a subcommittee that could kind of fit into an agenda that already exists while furthering CLF's mission. Kate, you probably have wiser things to say here than I do, please.
Well, I have a suggestion. I think it's really great to recognize that we don't need to compete with other organizations. I think every local organization is going to have a little bit of a different social dynamic. And so you can sort of see what that is. It might be that you become, CLF is almost a working group of this other organization at one level, which is, I think, sort of how Boston is working. But another way would be to say, well, if we have a member in our local hub CLF who would be in the AIA, maybe they serve on the AIA's reuse committee and they liaise back and forth, and their role on that committee is to be the advocate for embodied carbon inclusion in those topics. And so then they come back and report to this broader CLF hub who might have people who aren't a member in the AIA.
Perfect. I just want to mention we're at time right now, but it's also a rare opportunity to have everyone on the call. So if you do want to or able to stick around, we're happy to stick around for a few more minutes. But if you need to drop off, no problem. Yeah, so we'll just continue.
And we should just say, before anybody does drop off, thank you so much again. This is so amazing what volunteers are able to do through collective action. And please reach out for help. Don't feel like you're stuck. If you're ever feeling stuck and frustrated, reach out.
For sure. And I also want to reiterate, if you are interested in the regional hub director position, please email me and we'll go from there. Thank you. Any other comments? Good to see.
I need to go. Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Well, I think we're probably good. So thanks again, everyone. And yeah, please reach out for support or help. Thank you. Cheers.